Hello, hello, and welcome back to Mandibil. And as promised in my comments, I'm back with a follow-up to my first video. Now, I have been through a lot of BS with with this PowerPoint presentation project here, and there's a few some expectations I had about how to do this in PowerPoint, and how to do it, recording slides and so on, and it seems that PowerPoint doesn't want to do it the way I want to do it, and I can't get PowerPoint to do it the way I want to do it. For instance, I want to show a slide and then let it keep recording. If I go backwards, if I'm in slide 5 and I want to show you slide 3 and then switch back to 4 or 5, it can't do that. So it sort of resets the recording and does all sorts of weird shit that I've talked to customer service and the, you know, some lady somewhere who speaks bad English, and it's like a shit show, right? And then trying to figure out how to put this video frame in without it doing it itself and placing it somewhere else where I don't want it. And you know, okay, I think I've figured out how to do it, because I want to do it's the idea of doing a slideshow in PowerPoint is nice and simple, because if I'm already doing it in PowerPoint, which is where I usually like to do my presentations, to put a video in and then record it is actually that's a nice solution in my opinion. It's just a weird way that that Microsoft has chosen to do this, but I think they expect not to make a elaborate video where you switch between slides, but you take slide 1, record slide 2, slide 3, as if you are making a presentation, as if, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. You're not allowed to go backwards in time here, right? Okay, so if I'm going to use, as far as I can figure out, otherwise I will have to use a third-party recorder of the screen and so on. I don't want to do that. Then I'd rather do some kind of streaming app, right? So I have to, if I use one slide, then I'd use the next slide and the next slide. I can't go backwards and make a video that is functional anyway. So just so you know, right? So if I have to refer to something prior, I have to do it only linguistically and, you know, show it to you through the video window here, right? And you have to sort of recall what I just shown you, right? Okay. So with a lot of, you know, frustrating software shit out of the way, hoping this is a good recording, let me get back into the scope of my philosophy. And yesterday, or early today, my time, Johnny Isometric, not Johnny Mnemonic, but Johnny Isometric, put up a comment, and I really like your approach, Johnny Isometric, Mr. Isometric. You give a timestamp, you cut and paste a quote or represent a quote from my presentation, and then you reflect on that. I mean, how much more could I ask, right? Brilliant, great stuff, right? And there were 2 questions as far as I understood it, and I have cut and paste each of the questions in my presentation here. So I'll take it one at a time, right? But I can't show you the question unless I have shown you this slide first. So, I mean, it might be too cumbersome doing something like this in PowerPoint. Then I'll have to eat it and then do maybe some kind of streaming app, right? So with all the things you can do in PowerPoint, you can't recording switching back and forth between slides. It's just boggles the mind, right? I mean, you can have, you know, all the strangest video effects on the screen and shadows here and shadows there, but you're not allowed to switch back and forth between slides. Oh my God, right? It's just, I mean, I don't get it. I simply don't get it. because it's such a lovely feature to be able to record PowerPoint directly, but you can only go slavishly slide by slide. Who the hell came up with that limitation, man, right? Okay, modern times. I can see the next slide, but you can't see it on screen. But I can read the next slide on my screen here, right? I'm sitting from the back end talking to you basically, and I can read out loud the question while you can look at this screen. So maybe that's a good idea to do it that way. So Johnny Isometric says that in minute 3:33:22 seconds, I say, what can exist is my experience. And yes, and then he comments, since we can't rule out there is an external world, wouldn't it be more reasonable to refrain from equating these two terms and instead regard experience as a subset of existence? Careful now, right? Careful, careful, careful. Because just because I came up with a new word doesn't mean there's a whole new realm or something like that, right? It's like saying, it's the same, your thinking is something like this, and correct me if I misunderstand you, but I see a beaver, I see an elephant, I see a dog, I see a cat, I see a human. Let's create the category of mammal and say they're all mammals. Then you're saying, well, wouldn't it be smart to make beaver a subset of animal or mammal, right? No, it's because it's a particular category, it's not a subset. It's like saying that the groceries in your grocery bag is a subset of your grocery bag. That's not how it works. Just because I add a term to it doesn't make it something. Just be careful, right? There's some kind of fallacy embedded in it, I suspect, but I'm not sure what it's called, and I'm not sure if it's even identified or anything like that, right? But if anything, I would rather say that existence is a subset of experience. And why I say that, I have to refer to my ontology. So the next slide is this one I just read out to you, right, from Johnny Isometric. So you can see that I'm not just grabbing it out of my behind, right? Okay, so if we go into, you saw the green ontology box in my diagram before, the complete picture, the scope of my philosophy, right? So if we take that green box and say, now we're dealing with ontology. So let me discuss this ontology thing with you. It's nice that you gave me your question, because it actually pointed out a weakness in how I presented it. And what I didn't do was saying that I'm categorizing my ontology in A, B, and C. I mentioned that, but I didn't say that I'm actually categorizing level C, or category C as a separate category, different from the two others. And it's different in the way that qualia and cognitions, which are the first two ones, are the ones I'm calling existence. The last one are not existence, because further down the line of my philosophy, there's a reason why I do this. So it's sort of, I've already done some philosophy that is sort of undisclosed in this series that explains why I do this. Okay, but let me take it on directly now, right? Which is, all abstractions are dependent on qualia and or cognitions. If there was no qualia, there would be no cognitions. And if there was no qualia and cognitions, there would be no abstractions, in my opinion. That's basically an axiom you could say I have about how my phenomena work. So you can have abstractions only from qualia. For instance, if you're listening to music, which is sort of a particular arrangement of sounds, right? And you have some emotional reaction, or maybe you get a desire, maybe it's painful if it's Engelbert Humperdinck, right? But Celine Dion. If you can possibly have, that's why maybe we have the idea of art, right? Art is basically just enveloping yourself in your qualia, you could say, right? Okay, but it's not that art doesn't use cognition, but because it does, right? Okay, but so even if my qualia and cognitions are not completely in my control, or something that sort of is maybe completely me, the abstractions that follow from them must be. And that is why they are classified as completely subjective, right? Abstractions can only be subjective, in my opinion. That's why I'm saying, that I'm clarifying what you are actually addressing here, which is fantastic, right? You're very sharp. Good, great. Keep on being that, right? If you want my opinion. Existence is based on qualia and cognitions. That is what I refer to when I talk about existence. So, to refer back to your slide or your question, which I can't show you because then I would be going backwards in my presentation here, right? Which would apparently destroy everything, right? And I'm hoping this works out, but it's like, dealing with that you're saying that existence is, or experience is a subset of existence. No, existence is actually a subset of experience, of phenomena, you could say, right? If you want to make it precise, existence is a subset of qualia, is a particular set of qualia, particular kind of qualia. And further down the line, there is an even more precise kind of phenomena which I classify as knowledge, which are cognitions. Those are basis of my knowledge, what I consider knowledge, right? So what can exist may actually at the end turn out for me to be smart, to equate with knowledge, but expanded to everything that can be, everything that can exist, can be known, right? Ontology describes everything. I can make an ontology about colors or a sound or a taste that I'm not experiencing at the moment, but because I have prior memory of those experiences, I deal with them as if I could potentially have it at any time, right? But what can exist is described in my ontology, but what does exist is a definition of what it means to actually have direct access to existence. I can, when I say that's an elephant, and I point and I experience elephant, I cognize elephant, then I have knowledge of elephant. But if I'm saying, yeah, I saw an elephant yesterday, well, then it's not knowledge, because it's a memory, right? It's an abstraction from cognition. It's abstracted into something we call memory. It's no longer knowledge then. But elephants can exist. I'm just not knowing elephants at the moment, right? I hope this is clear. I actually like this philosophy of mine very much, right? Because it so clearly points out what it means to know, right? And an important aspect of it is that cognitions are either there or they're not there. Either you're cognizing elephant or you're not cognizing elephant. If you're sort of looking out in the horizon, and you know the old Lawrence of Arabia movie where this what's he called, that Bedouin who comes on the camel riding towards the well where Lawrence and his fellow man they're waiting, he's riding towards them, it takes a long time, right? And you have this, what's it called when the heat makes the what the fuck is it called, right? You know what I mean, when you see that heat waves or so, right? And you say, is that a camel? It looks like a camel. You might have a gray area there where you're saying, well, I'm not sure. But at some point you will say, okay, now I'm sure it's a camel. Because it's not on-off kind. It's camel all the time now, right? So at some point you're sort of, okay, now I'm sure, you could say I'm sure, certainty, I don't like the idea of certainty, right? I'm sure that it's a camel, but it might turn into an elephant next second. How would you know? You can't know. But then you will no longer know camel, then you would know elephant, right? See? Okay. So to get to the next question, which is the next slide, and I hope it keeps going. It does. It looks good so far. Fingers crossed and toes crossed. I'm hoping this goes well, right? Software nowadays is like, having your head under your arm. Okay, so at minute 35, I say in my prior video, if I don't treat it as if there is an external world, but there is an external world, I'm kind of screwed, right? And then Isometric says, yet this is what most of us do every morning upon waking. We just decide not to regard the experience we had in our dreams as events that actually happened. Is this going to get us in trouble? I need to clarify. And I have mentioned this idea of a sort of a risk assessment kind of Pascal's wager. It's a 2x2 matrix. It's sort of game theory, I think it's called, but maybe you can tell me what it is. Where I say, I can't know if it's this, it can be either or, and I can decide to go with either or, but I can't know if it's either or. So there are 4 possibilities, there are 4 scenarios I have to deal with. So I make a risk assessment about what I choose, right? So, first of all, dreams, I classify them as abstractions, so I don't need to deal with them in this question. It's quite simple. So, right, when you wake up, you're not experiencing the dream anymore. You have a memory of the dream. A memory is an abstraction. Done. Okay, so get in trouble. Well, let's see the last slide here. Let me try to explain it as well as I can, right? Okay. So this is going to be a little more text than usually. Well, maybe not usually, but okay, so carefully. We have the idea of the external world, right? So, as I say, I will never be able to, personally, I'm still waiting for the good argument that there must be an external world, right? I've never seen one. But I can't rule it out, because if I don't have access to an external world, it's by what's it called? By definition, I don't have access to it. If I had, it wouldn't be external, right? So if it's an external world, I don't have access to it. So how could I possibly know about it? If I'm imagining it, it's still just an imagination, but I can't rule out that there's something to that imagination that I just can't get to. So what do I do if I neither can or can't get to, if there is an external world? I have to sort of figure out which one I'm going with, right? So I'm saying here, okay, the first column is yes, there is actually an external world, and the other column is no, there isn't. There is no maybe category here, right? You can only have a little external world. If there's a little external world, there is an external world. And otherwise, there's no external world, eh? Done. Okay, so my axiom is either I choose an axiom that says, yes, I'm going with the idea that there is an external world, or I'm not going with the idea. Or I'm going with the idea that there isn't an external world, right? So I just have to close my window here. So what do? So I make this matrix. If I, in the top one is, yes, I'm going with the idea of external world. What happens if there is an external world and there isn't an external world? Okay, or how do I approach that, right? How would I, what would the risk assessment be, right? And the other choice is, the row is that there is no external world. How would that risk go with if there actually is an external world and there isn't an external world? And I try to each of these four combinations, I try to assess what the risks are. So what I'm doing in the first one is, yes, I'm going with the idea that there is an external world, and there actually is an external world. What would the sort of consequences be? And I write that, fine, then at least I'm attempting to align myself with how things are. So there are actually no problems as long as I get my philosophy in line. If I make a stupid philosophy, I'm possibly equally as screwed if there isn't an external world. I don't know, but you know. So as long as I get the rest of my philosophy in line with this understanding, without screwing it up and without staying, skeptical and don't invent shit that I'm up the top of my mind, or bringing in dogmas and shit, right? As long as I'm strict with my philosophy, this should actually be a fairly decent approach, right? So in this regard, yes, it's a fairly good decision. What if I'm saying there is an external, or I'm going with the idea that there's an external world and build my philosophy from it, but there isn't one? Well, I would probably use time and energy on aspects that are futile and fruitless, but possibly not particularly harmful, because there's no external world that can sort of fuck with me, right? But I'm spending time and energy on something that doesn't really need to be addressed. But it's not necessarily particularly hurtful, right? Harmful. It's like, how could I put it? You're waiting for something that doesn't happen, or you're spending time on preparing for guests that doesn't arrive, or something like that, right? You're wasting some time, you're spending time on something that's not, productive, but you're not going to, run out in front of a train or something like that, right? So the yes row is so far decently good, right? Now let's take the other one. What if I take the axiom there is no external world, which is sort of the solipsist approach? Well, if there actually is an external world, but my philosophy is constructed from the idea that there isn't an external world, that sounds to me like be very problematic, right? Because I may disregard potential signs that should be taken seriously, since I cannot rule out that some of my experience are representations of an outside. It's very problematic, even deadly. If that train, fuck the train, right? And then dead, right? From a cost benefit, it seems like it's risky. I don't know how to better describe it, but maybe you could do a better job describing this. But I hope it gets across where I'm going, right? Okay, so what if I have an axiom that says there isn't an external world, and there isn't an external world, then at least I'm attempting to align myself with how things are. There are no problems, right? Because I'm dealing with something, I'm not dealing with something that isn't there. Fine. But going back to my ontology, all of a sudden there starts to creep in some questions, right? Like, why are phenomena behaving the way they are? Why do I have these qualia that all of a sudden have cognitions? I would have to say, well, who cares, right? Like any old solipsist would do. I don't know. It's just funny things going on. Solipsists kind of have to throw, I don't care, right? And I don't like that either. So the no axiom is from bad to okay. The yes axiom is from fine, great, to, well, it could be better, right? Comparing these two, yes or no, because I can't decide the top one, the actual external world. I can't decide that, but I can decide whether I'm going to with the yes axiom or no axiom. So in my book, the yes axiom is by far the best one, right? So my philosophy henceforth is going to be based on the axiom that there actually is an external world. But at the same time, I have to remind myself, just because I decided so to act accordingly doesn't mean I created an external world all of a sudden, right? Be careful. I'm just going to treat some of my phenomena as if they are a representation of the external world. That is also an axiom, but because that doesn't follow. Just because I came up with the idea on an external world and I'm going to decide that I'm approaching it as if there is, doesn't mean that any of it follows from some kind of natural flow of argumentation, anything like that. I have to decide it for myself. Again, I have to bring in some axioms, right? That might be the next step we're dealing with in epistemology and so on, right? Okay, I hope this clarifies a bit, and at least you dug down in some very important aspects of my philosophy that is probably very much needed in order to understand where I'm coming from. So if you have further comments to this, I would very much love your comment, and something that isn't clear, or so then I'll make another video, no problem, right? So otherwise, give me a like, give me a subscribe if you think I'm doing something that is creative and constructive and productive and useful for you. Consider Discord below, and there's also possibilities for donations if you want to help me out economically, right? Maybe that will encourage me to do even more than I'm doing now. So with that said, have a nice day. See you in the next video.